Hello, my name is Alex Kirk, and I'm a global principal engineer with Corelight. Today, I'm going to be presenting An Alert Has Fired, Now What?, which is a discussion of why high-quality alerting on its own is insufficient for the modern SOC. Let's first set the stage by acknowledging the sad reality that most SOCs aren't able to go from alerting to the actions necessary to take care of their network, no matter how you look at the problem. The majority of SOCs have a very difficult time simply processing the volume of alerts that they get out of their existing tools. It's common for organizations to expect to only get through a certain percentage of alerts, which is why prioritizing them is such an important topic. The fact that they're not even getting through all of the alerts that they have helps explain why a significant percentage of breaches are still going undetected for months at a time. There are countless examples of organizations that were compromised that, in retrospect, had all of the alerts they needed in their security tools, but were simply never able to find them among the pile of noise and not able to do anything about them. It's also why the majority of breach detections are still coming from third-party sources like law enforcement, consulting firms, or even affiliated organizations like banks that see suspicious transactions and tip off an organization to a problem. The reason why so many organizations are unable to review all of their security alerts comes down to what's fundamentally a very simple math problem. According to the most recent SAN SOC survey, the average enterprise SOC gets approximately 10,000 alerts per day, a staggeringly high number to start with, no matter how you look at it. That number is then paired with a much smaller one. On average, there are typically somewhere between 2 and 10 people in those SOCs who are tasked with reviewing that pile of events. If we then take the 480 minutes that are in a standard 8-hour shift, and we assume for a moment that humans are actually robots and will work perfectly through that entire time every day with no breaks, distractions, or slowdowns because they're tired or bored, even with the high end of the average number of analysts, you're still looking at 1,000 alerts per analyst, which would mean that they need to resolve just over 2 alerts per minute to keep up with the pace of noise coming out of their alerting tools. The reality, unfortunately, is that it's typically at least 10 minutes to resolve any given event, and sometimes much longer than that, depending upon the complexity of the alert in question and the amount of digging an analyst has to do to get to the data necessary to validate the alert. That's a full order of magnitude off of where things ought to be in a perfect world. The challenge before security teams becomes even greater when you try to go from the mundane, operationally focused process of validating and triaging all of your alerts to something resembling a big picture that can tell you who's going after your network and whether they've been successful. Take, for example, this MITRE diagram explaining how a specific APT operates and how organizations can go about detecting their behaviors and keeping them off of the network. I've been in the security industry for 17 years now, both writing detections and helping organizations work with the outputs of their security tools, and this still makes my head hurt. While it's technically an accurate picture of the reality on the ground, a map like this also leaves the impression that in order to be successful at fending off advanced attackers, organizations need to have every single one of this extensive list of security data sources and controls, and will have to detect each and every one of these techniques to boot, when in reality, finding even a portion of this activity and being able to act on it quickly and intelligently can cut off attacks early or tip defenders off to the presence of an APT sufficiently that they can respond without a 100% complete picture like this. It's no wonder then, given the incredible level of complexity in which attacks are often described, that understaffed and underskilled defenders so frequently turn to defensive technologies that promise to do all of that correlation behind the scenes for them, simply spitting out a small set of, quote, high fidelity alerts that are going to be all they need to worry with. This mentality is personified in images like this one, which is an actual marketing graphic from an IoT security vendor's website. Buy our shiny black boxes, the image promises, and our super secret advanced algorithms will take care of all those nasty hackers for you, leading to a new dawn where everything is safe and wonderful and your security team will never have to worry again. They, of course, want you to pay no attention to the fact that their algorithms often make mistakes, like building a data center with giant windows to let in the heat from the sun, or putting it next to a dangerous device like an oil rig, as they've apparently done here. While it's understandable that people want to reach for the easy button when faced with as complex a task as cybersecurity can be, the cold hard reality is that no such button exists. And after more than 20 years of one vendor after another selling technology with the promise that this time they really do have an easy way out of the problem, the chances that an easy button is coming anytime soon are slim to none. A major part of why this is the case is the fact that no one security tool works in isolation. All successful security programs are built from a collection of tools and processes. To make a sports analogy, you can't simply sign a single superstar and expect them to be able to carry your team. Even the greatest stars have to be able to work with the rest of their teams for follow-up after their brilliant performance or to set them up for their moment of glory in the first place. In the same vein, it doesn't matter if your security tools generate all the right alerts to find intruders on your network if you lack the context to understand them and close the holes that led to the attackers getting in the first place. I'm here to argue for a completely different approach to security, which is exemplified by this pyramid of SOC capabilities. This was put together by Matt Swan, a senior incident responder at Microsoft. And while I know it's easy to make jokes at Microsoft's expense when it comes to security, as an organization, they've been very successful in the last decade or so, going from a laughingstock of the security world to a leader in that space. And so they make a great role model for going from zero to hero, so to speak. What you'll notice right away here is that we're starting with something very mundane, which will never appear on a marketing slick or an advertisement. Inventory, which is otherwise known as having a clear picture of what exactly is on the network you're trying to defend. This is still a major problem for many organizations. When I was at Tenable doing vulnerability management 3 years ago, I would ask people if their CMDB or asset tracking systems were up to date, and about half of them literally laughed in my face. Many organizations took days to answer the basic question of, do I have SolarWinds devices on my network when that compromise was announced? Without this data, you'll never be able to tell if an accurately detected attack was actually relevant to the target it was aimed at, or whether a device is rogue or legitimately within policy. Getting a handle on this is one of the key things a network monitoring solution can do for you. By double checking whether assets observed on the network appear in the asset tracker, and then either working with an active scanner to determine what is happening on that host, or simply listening passively to the protocols that they speak and the banner strings that they send to identify what sorts of systems they are. From there, knowing what those systems are actually doing on the network, the telemetry piece here, is also critical to both incident response and proactive threat hunting. Seeing everything a device was doing before, during, and after an attack that generated an alert makes it much, much easier to determine if an alert for, as an example, SQL injection meant that malware really was successfully dropped, or if the web server someone was trying to inject just 404'd and moved on. Observing that the same user credentials came in within minutes from IP addresses in Dubai and Sao Paulo lets hunters know that they need to check for stolen credentials versus just mundane VPN access. In the event of a valid detection, being able to see things like which system touched a given file hash makes the triage process possible, and easy if the telemetry is cleanly structured and well integrated with the detection layer. Certainly, none of the more advanced functions on this pyramid are possible without the layers below them. Going after specific threat actors and their behaviors won't happen without clear, easily accessible telemetry and inventory data. And for all but the most elite SOCs, a solid detection layer to help find the everyday attacks that we're all faced with. So how does an organization go about building these capabilities? Fundamentally, the data that's necessary comes from three key sources. The most traditional source is the endpoint, which is now most commonly implemented as EDR, or endpoint detection and response, which is the modern version of antivirus that goes beyond old school hash matching by recording detailed system level information about everything that's happening on a given machine and applying intelligent analytics to it to detect and, based on your policy, potentially block malicious activity. Smart defenders know that not all of their endpoints will have detection on them, whether that's because they're a vendor tool with a custom operating system that'll never be supported by EDR, or just because that particular laptop got missed in the rollout. And so they'll also take data from the network, which is guaranteed to be comprehensive when you instrument it fully. Network data also leaves advanced attackers with nowhere to hide. While the right rootkit can hide from EDR or wipe its logs, any attacker that crosses the network, which is to say, all of them, will leave packets behind, regardless of how well they encrypt or obfuscate them. The final source of data, of course, is threat intelligence, the actual signature fuel that drives so many detections, whether supplied by a third-party vendor or an internal team. All of this data then rolls up to a SIEM, an XDR, a UEBA, or whatever other analytic system that the SOC has chosen to use to centralize their data, so that it can be cross-correlated, validated, and accessed without analysts needing to log into multiple different systems to get the information that they need. Conceptually, all of that looks pretty easy, right? So why is it that this model has existed in one form or another for nearly a decade now, and yet organizations are struggling to actually get any real value out of it? Well, it's because their implementation usually looks like this. They're pulling data in from a ton of different places: application servers, security devices, network devices, and of course, endpoint solutions, all of which are coming in from different vendors and different formats with varying levels of details provided. Some of them do a good job of exporting data using standard models to map into a SIM, and some of them are trying to pull you into their UI and workflows, and so they do a terrible job of actually sharing their data with the rest of the toolkit. I've worked with many organizations that had to embark on a multi-year journey to try to make coherent sense of a data picture like this, only to find that their organization had shifted tools out from underneath them, or that a vendor had switched a data format, meaning that they had to keep the process going, sometimes indefinitely. That's not to mention the fact that each one of the places that they're pulling data from represents a point of failure, where a sysadmin can turn down logging to save CPU on a firewall, or a system upgrade can break the logging setup altogether. Even when an organization succeeds in getting through all of this administrative overhead to keep a project like this up and running in the long term, they may still be missing critical security information. For example, if you're logging DNS from your corporate Active Directory server, not only will you miss DNS going to other servers outside of your enterprise's control, you won't get the answers to the queries that your endpoints are making, at least not without turning up log verbosity so high that many organizations would have to upgrade their entire AD infrastructure to support it. This hidden administrative burden in collecting network data is why the NDR market is growing so much lately. More and more organizations are starting to see the picture from the previous slide and realize that they can eliminate those headaches by directly examining network traffic as it crosses the wire. Using a single solution removes all of the translation barriers among the network-oriented logs from the last slide and makes it easy to line up with endpoint data as well. Security teams can be directly responsible for ensuring continued monitoring at the level of detail they need, with IT's logs being just a backup in case of disaster. Modern NDR tools are also built with forensics and security in mind and typically collect everything that a SOC needs, instead of what an IT operations person debugging server performance needs. And since they have a comprehensive picture of what's happening on the network, NDRs can do a great deal to apply detections and intelligence to the data that they're collecting for direct alerts, as well as enrichment of algorithms that work side by side with endpoint data. So how should security teams choose between competing NDR offers on the market today? By evaluating how well they can link detection and evidence in the context of the SOC that's going to be using them. Specifically, this means that any alerts that an NDR generates should be presented directly with all of the data from the sessions that led to the alert, with ease of investigation in mind from the start. Wherever possible, third-party analytics alerts from the NDR data should reference the underlying data directly as well. And at the very least, all the data used in the creation of these alerts should be interlinked, so that analysts can quickly move from a connection flagged as malicious to the protocol details around it, or vice versa. Analysts should be able to pick up an alert and pull all the supporting data through with minimal effort and minimal chance for a weak linkage to break the chain and make it difficult to impossible to get the information that they need. The obvious benefit of being able to quickly resolve events is the proverbial inbox zero, being able to get through all of the alerts that come in from your tool set. What's less obvious but equally important is the understanding of your enterprise's environment that the SOC will gain from being able to see why alerts are being generated. Seeing what detections are firing and what happens to generate those detections will give analysts a feel for what they should be looking for and what they can discard as normal. This knowledge, combined with having time to dedicate to proactive investigation instead of simply responding to a pile of alerts, means that they'll have a fighting chance when no alerts are being generated on malicious behavior. As a case in point, infected SolarWinds devices made some of their DNS queries to systems in AWS and made SSL connections to servers not on SolarWinds.com, neither of which was enough for a security tool to generate an alert, but would be enough for a team that knows their network to start digging in deeper, potentially allowing them to find the compromise before their vendors do. So, what are the key takeaways that I want you to bring out of this session today? Well, the first is that you'll never be able to get maximum value out of your alerts without strongly linked evidence to help you validate and investigate. It's all too easy for alerts to be black boxes of information that analysts can never fully understand or even have confidence in. And so being able to see the information underlying an alert and know that it is valid and understand what its scope is critical to being able to do something with the detections being generated by your security tools. Of course, also, even the best alerting technologies will miss important items because they lack the security context of your specific network. All vendors are writing detections for the broad marketplace and behaviors that are definitively bad, regardless of your specific organization's posture, and often miss policy level items that are where advanced attackers like to hide. And finally, truly advanced security organizations don't have blind spots. They have figured out how to get through the mess of data and logging that is the standard enterprise model to a comprehensive picture that gives them everything they need in order to both track down alerts being generated by their tools and proactively find incidents within their network. They understand the value of their data and they do everything they can to keep it in their organization. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions the audience may have.